Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Healey, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Principals Association. Thank you so much for joining us again this morning. A lot has happened since last Thursday from our last webinar. And so the goal this morning is to briefly give you an update about some of those moving pieces, to also talk to you about the legislation that went through the House and the Senate yesterday, Senate Bill 751. Which is on the governor's desk right now, which has to do with some amendments to 751 about COVID-19. And then, as we did last week, just to share a couple resources with you as well. I would encourage you, we have muted everyone just so we don't get feedback, to use the chat room. Steph is here from our office. We're keeping our social distance. She's way across the other side of the room, so she'll be monitoring that chat room as well. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I really want to talk about is, since last week, is the update on the school closure issue. So as all of you know right now, the soonest under the governor's order that schools can reopen would be on April the 7th. Also put into that directive was that also would give 2 days for staff to come in to get ready for the students, which would be April 7th and April 8th. And the soonest that students could report would be April 9th, which, as you all know, which is right before Easter, which is somewhat problematic as well. People have asked us, why didn't they make it after Easter? I can't answer that question for you. But I will tell you that just because the governor says that's the first day that kids could come back, it really is a local decision, and some superintendents have already announced that they will not open school. The first that they would open school would be April 13th, which is after the Easter holiday. Now, talking about that April deadline, to be realistic, and this is not fact, this is just my personal opinion, that as we continue to have more cases identified across the counties in Pennsylvania, and as those counties grow that the governor's put at stay at home, it may be unlikely that we're even going to hit the April 13th date at this point. So just beware that that's a moving target right now. I think most people believe right now that we're not going to be back in school on April 9th or April 13th. So I was thinking about this issue a little bit, and there was some cause thinking about, so how do you get in the 180 school days if school communities wish to still do 180 school days, and where we're at with this? So I looked at one of our local district calendars here. So today, based on their calendar, would be about the 133rd day of school. So if schools went back on April the 9th, and they kept just the Memorial Day break in May, they could actually, if the community wanted to do that, could get their 180 days in on June 15th. So that's an interesting date. Since we could go really until June 30th, that leaves about 11 days of wiggle room to reach the 180 days. So based on that calendar that I just said, if they went back, let's say on April 27th instead of April 9th or April 13th, and went all the way to June 30th, they could still get the 180 days in. However, having said that, as you know by now, there is not a requirement to get the 180 days in. That's going to be a waiver, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as far as the legislation that just came through the House and the Senate. So really, the 180-day thing is off the table. However, as I said before, will there be some community pressure to try to get to that 180 days? Or elsewise, what if one school stays in your region until June 15th, another one goes to June 20th? What's going to be the fallout from that? So I think what you're probably going to see are area superintendents getting together just like they usually do their calendars in sync as much as possible, try to determine when we get the go-ahead to go back, what they're going to do as far as the 180 days or not, or their last day as well. So more on that as we go through. So Steph, I'm going to ask you to put up the first slide, which is the continuity of education. So I'll wait till that comes up, and hopefully you can see our screen at this point. Somebody just give a chat out there to Steph so she knows that our shared screen is up there, and I'll wait just a second. Okay, so we're good to go. So this is probably the biggest question that's out there right now. So this is my little graph to kind of make sense of continuity of education. So I guess I would start off by saying what you need to think about is continuity of education is the umbrella term that PDE is using right now to deliver some type of instruction out to the field. So as right now, and the reason why I say right now, because these are the options that exist right now. This is about to be changed either today or tomorrow. And that's that first option. The first option is actually to do nothing. And I know that many school districts were on hold over these 2 weeks thinking about, well, maybe we'll be back in time, so let's not push anything out, because they had this whole issue of fate that was circling around. And I'll get back to that issue in a moment as well. So districts were on hold. They were planning to do something with their students, getting ready to push things out. So the do nothing option was a real option over these 2 weeks. But I will tell you, in the legislation right now, the do nothing option really comes off the table. So you kind of forget about that. There are not 3 paths of the road right now. There are really 2. And here are those 2 options. And I'm using the terms straight from the PDE options. And we'll take questions as we go forward. Let me get through this graphic first. So one of the first options is enrichment and review. So these are terms that are now using under the PDE guidance. And the way I think about this is these are the informal activities. They're designed to either reinforce or extend a student's prior learning. So think about this. This is prior learning, not new learning. As opposed to, you can go down the path of planned instruction, which is more like formal teaching and learning similar to what happens in that classroom setting. And this could be thought of as new learning as well. Now, you can also do a combination of enrichment and review and planned instruction. So I know many districts now are gearing up to go down one of these paths or both of these paths at this point. So what's the connection between this and FAPE, the Free Appropriate Public Education? So the U.S. Department of Education sent out guidelines acknowledging that we cannot do everything to fulfill some of the IEPs that we have for our students in our school districts. However, that should not stop us from trying to get kids involved in some type of instruction, whether that's enrichment and review or planned instruction. So that's an interesting kind of debate that's going on right now. And right now, the legislation will say that we need to put in a good faith effort to go forward. We also know that there are many superintendents in school districts, and we also actually have reports right now that from our constituents that say that parents have even been contacted about special ed attorneys out there just waiting to file a lawsuit on districts for FAPE and not doing FAPE. So just be aware of that. I know most people are very, very concerned about that. But there's really not much we can do at this point in time except to try to think about FAPE, to try to think about the student's IEP, and try to deliver that in the best possible way for all students. So if you're going to roll out anything for enrichment and review, as well as planned instruction, which you're going to have to do something now, because of the extended closure, you need to kind of keep FAPE in mind. So what about IEP timelines? Again, those evaluations and the reevaluation meetings and those IEP team meetings, again, you have the availability, if you can, to get parents to do those virtually as well, and to be thinking about some of those timelines to the best of your possibility. So the legislation that's on the governor's desk right now that was passed in the House and Senate yesterday also requires that each child with an IEP, that the school must provide now a written notice to the parent on how the child will receive their services. So once the governor signs that, school districts and schools will need to be thinking about what that written notice is going to be. Now, there is no template that I know about that written notice. There's no specific timeline that I know about at this point in reference to when you have to get that notice out, but that will be a requirement as well. So to me, this is the continuity of education road path that we're on right now. I will also say that delivery of stuff is all over the continuum as we think about it. There's everything from paper packets that are being developed to full online instruction. I know school districts are grappling with how do we get that information out, for example. I know some school districts are thinking about using their school bus routes, for example, and their school busing to drop off packets at those designated locations. There are other school districts, for example, letting parents thinking about driving in, which is a stop and go, not letting them get out of their car, but even if they're doing food pickup for students, is actually giving packets to students that way. But there are a lot of issues revolving around continuity of education. Last evening, as a matter of fact, we were on a call with Senator Casey from Pennsylvania that had some of our superintendents on the call, as well as our principals, who did a great job of letting the senator know about some of the issues that we're facing under this issue and with some other ones. So one of the issues, again, for this is whether you're going to roll something out, and when you roll something out is preparing for that learning. So how do we get staff up and running to prepare for that? While thinking in mind that we need to make sure about their health and safety and about social distancing. I know that we're getting reports from some school districts at this point in time, whether they're staggering staff members to come in at certain times, so there's no more than a few people in the building at any time to get some materials and then leaving the building. I know other school districts are thinking about doing some training of their staff. Again, they're using Zoom and other types of things as well. But just be careful about bringing a lot of staff in at some time and then sitting them in a room for training. That's not going to meet the social distancing framework that we're in. The other issue is about connectivity. You know, we have different degrees of equity among Pennsylvania with internet connectivity, with devices that parents and homes may have. As well as the issue now with everybody working at home, even some parents and them having to get online, what's going to be the bandwidth when we're trying to roll out some of these things online for students as well? So we don't know whether the internet is going to crash, whether the parents are going to say, no, I have to be on the internet right now, you cannot be, things like that. A couple other issues are surfacing that you need to keep in mind. I know people are using some other kind of video platforms as well, whether it's Zoom or GoToMeeting. We already have reports about this, so I think principals, you're going to need to keep this in mind. So if you're doing a Zoom meeting, whether teachers are doing that, kids are going to do some weird things. We've already heard reports of a kid possibly showing up with the beer can, for example, on the Zoom thing, or another kid being on Zoom with their shirt off. So how do we control that except by turning off the video? The other aspect that has come up, and this is a legitimate one as well, whether it's a teacher and or a principal delivering instruction by way of Zoom, and you happen to see something in the home that causes you to pause, or maybe the kids are left alone and you don't know that, what's our mandated reporting requirements for something that we may see that we're uncomfortable with? Those are all questions that are coming up right now that we're dealing with. So we have connectivity issues, preparing for lesson issues. We also have the mental health issues that we specifically mentioned, and our principals and superintendents did that with Senator Casey last night, is how do we continue to support our staff and students in this time of need? Because as you know, many of our schools are the hub of our community, and they look for that as their safe haven and their normal thing that they do every single day. And so how do we continue to provide for those services? So we have some real concerns about that. And then looking ahead, I will just add, there are additional stressors that are going to be coming. The longer this goes, the more stressors we're going to have that come into that realm of mental health. For example, we have kids that can't participate in their spring sporting events. We have kids that may not be able to go to the prom or may not even have graduation. Those are things that we need to be creative about and be thinking about planning for those for the long future, because we really don't know. Nobody can tell us right now what is going to be the situation in Pennsylvania with the spread of COVID-19. So I'm going to stop there on the continuity of education piece before I get into legislation and see if there are some specific questions about that I can help you with or expand on. So Steph, do you have any on there?
Our LEA responsible for providing students who may be in alternative placements and a PhD program. What advice would you give?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We're waiting on specific guidance for PDE on that. I would just say that FAPE is FAPE, and we need to be thinking about who the provider of that, and if your school district's reaching out to those providers to find out what their plan is going forward as well. So this is going to be really widespread across all of our providers, whether that's in the district or out of the district. Any other ones?
Can you please repeat the question before answering?
Oh, yes. The question was about if there are providers, if students are receiving their services outside the school district. Was that it, Steph? Yes.
Special ed education all of us, our special ed director is saying that we should support IEPs any way possible. Can we clarify what is known and how we should be approaching as LEAs and enroll our teachers, regular homeroom teachers, as well as learning support teachers?
So the question was about special education and getting direction from their special education supervisors and things in the district about holding meetings. Again, I would say the U.S. Department of Education guidance suggests that if you could hold those meetings, you should try to hold those meetings unless you contact the parents and, open up that IEP saying, we're going to meet a little bit later with the parents' consent. Those are all things that are open and options for you right now. Again, we have to take our direction from the U.S. Department of Education on this issue and PDE.
What is the guidance around reporting attendance for virtual learning environments?
Yeah, so the question was, what is the guidance around recording attendance for instruction, right? For virtual learning environments. That's going to be very difficult to do. I mean, that question came up today. Again, I remind you, I have a 10 o'clock meeting with all the ed orgs every single morning. That question came up is, how do you really know, if you do video or not do video? Having kids check in, as you know, in chat rooms and things like that, you can have them type something in to make sure they're still there. You have kids walking off. We jokingly said, how do we really know those issues? And we don't. I mean, this is really a moving target. And as you know, we haven't been prepared for this. This is not something that we've had planned for, even though that as we control instruction in our schools and in our classrooms, it's much different when we're broadcasting that out to our homes right now. And a lot of these questions are going to surface as we go forward.
Why have we not heard from our Secretary of Education during the crisis?
So the question was, why haven't we heard from our Secretary of Education out of Washington, Betsy DeVos, on this issue? I can't answer that question at this point. I will tell you from our organization as well as the other organizations, that's why we're getting together to make sense and why we're continuing to collect questions from the field so that we can push those over to PDE or try to answer those ourselves. So again, keep those questions coming to me at my email address, which is Healey, Healey at paprinciples.org, because we're continuing to put those in our queue. We talk about them every single day, and then talk with PDE about how we can get and to formulate an appropriate response to your questions. And there are going to be many more as we go through. So I want to turn to legislation, and we'll come back to questions in a minute. So one of the things that I really want to talk about is what happened yesterday in the House and Senate. And as most of you know, there are a bunch of amendments that were going around in response to COVID-19. And they were looking at adding those amendments to a bill that had already bipartisan support. It just so happens that that bill is Senate Bill 751. So if there's a good news silver lining out of all of this, I will tell you it's Senate Bill 751, because this is the exact bill that we've been working on for the past 2 years about making changes to Act 82 in the teacher and principal educator effectiveness system. So that bill, once the governor signs this, will not only address the COVID issues, but also change the issues surrounding teacher and principal evaluation starting in the school year 2021 and 2022. Now, I'm not going to spend some time today because I don't want to muddy the waters with those changes for teacher and principal evaluation, because we have time for that. I actually have a PowerPoint on that we've been using in our regional meetings over the last year. So I'm going to wait a little bit on that issue to start sending that information out, because I really don't want to muddy everybody's waters with that information yet. But let me address the amendments to Senate Bill 751 that's on the governor's desk right now. So the first one is the 180-day waiver. Again, that requirement for public and non-public schools is waived effective immediately. So regardless of whether your communities push for 180 days, there will be no stipulation that you have to adjust your calendar going forward whenever we get back to school to get 180 days in. That actually will happen to be a local decision, and most likely, as I said previously, a regional decision based on the school districts in your region and your superintendents. The next issue amendment is the closure of schools. It actually allows the Secretary of Education now to close all school entities until the threat to the virus has ended. So regardless of the governor doing it, the Secretary of Education now may have the authority to do that as well. An issue around FIDs, which are your flexible instructional days, also allows the Secretary of Education to increase those number of flexible days to a number yet to be determined by the Secretary, and waive also the application deadline. So other waivers that will be granted to the Secretary of Education, career and technical education program hours, using the performance data in the teacher evaluation system, pre-K count hours, the 12-week student teacher requirement. As you know, they can't be in the schools right now to get the requirements in, so that 12-week student teacher requirement will be waived. The waiver of the NOCTI exams and the NIMS assessments as well. Another issue in the amendment is pay and PSERS credit for school employees. So basically what this says is no school employee shall receive more or less compensation because of the school closure or shortened year. So that protects us all as well in the PSERS system. So there's been an issue around school cleaning staff. And the amendment basically says each school entity shall provide any employee who is responsible for cleaning school facilities as a result of the threat with appropriate cleaning materials and protective clothing as recommended by the CDC. So we're trying to get some more information on that. What does that mean? Does that mean masks? Does that mean gloves? Does that mean gowns? Does it mean only in places where there was possible threat and exposure in the school? Knowing now that schools are already closed for 2 weeks and probably longer. So is this a real issue since we know that the recommended surface contamination is about 2 weeks or more, and that many schools, quite frankly, have been using their custodians to go from classroom to classroom to do some deep cleaning anyhow. So I don't know how big this issue is going to be going forward, but it is one we're getting questions about. So here's the one on special education. Each school entity shall provide written notice to the parent or guardian of each student who receives services under an IEP, under IDEA, of the school entity's plans for ensuring the student receives a free, appropriate public education. So there will be a requirement, again, for all of those IEP students, for their parents or guardians to receive something from the district that says how the school plans to provide those services. Continuity of education. So here is the exact language, a synopsis of the amendment. Each school entity shall make a good faith effort to plan to offer continuity of education to students. So if you go back to my graphic, as I said, once this is signed, the do nothing path comes off the roadway. You either have to do a combination of those two things that I talked about previously. Again, some other things I'll just mention really quickly. Federal testing waiver, the secretary shall apply, not might apply or may apply, that they shall apply to the U.S. Department of Education for a waiver of federal testing and accountability requirements and the testing for the 1920 school year. So I've raised this question before. The PSSAs are one thing, and I get that. That's probably an easier elimination than it is the keystones. The question I raised about the keystones is this. I think I mentioned this last Thursday as well, is the keystones are given at the end of the course. So if you take the student, for example, that is in algebra in 7th grade right now, and we think about that maybe school may not be in session for the rest of this school year, how does a student get credit for the keystone? Can they take the keystone later? Is it even advantageous to take the keystone later? Is too much water over the dam? And reinforcing those skills for a student to be successful on a keystone after that. And then this whole idea that if you take that idea, that this has really ramifications 5 years down the road. What I mean about that is that that student's keystone exam, as you know, is banked until they're in high school. So how do they meet that graduation requirement for that keystone? When you look at those options that we have for the graduation requirements down the road, how will that student meet that criteria for the graduation requirement because they don't have that keystone or a number of keystones? So that's a question that we cannot solve right now. That's a question in our queue for PDE. To me, I think it makes most sense that the waiver has to follow the student, because this is going to be years in advance right now, especially because it has really serious implications on the graduation requirements for the future and many years to come. So stay tuned for that one. That's one that we're continuing to address as we go forward. Here's one about professional development requirements. I know that there are many school leaders and teachers as well. They may be at the end of their cycle for either Act 48 or Act 45 credits at this point. And so there is a provision that shall be extended for 1 year. So those people that needed, for example, 30 more hours and they were in a course right now and can't complete that course and may not complete it by the end of the year, they'll have an extension for that as well, which is also a good thing. So I'm basically going to stop there. Those are the main things that have been pointed out with the amendments to Senate Bill 751. We fully expect that the governor is going to sign Senate Bill 751 either today or in the very near future, and we'll let you know about that as we go forward. So I'm going to pause right now before I talk about some resources to share with you to help you as you think about that continuity of education and where to go. I'm going to pause just to see if there are any more questions in the queue. And I'll turn to Steph for those.
We are required to send notice even if the district is seeking the past enrichment review and is voluntary and not planned instruction. So
the question was, do you still have to send a notice even though you're doing enrichment and review and not the other path? Our understanding is that notice must go out for all students that have IEPs, no matter what path you select on the roadway at this point. We're waiting some more guidance on that, and I think we will get some guidance on that. As I said, there's no template for what should be in that written notice, when it should be sent out, what's the timeline for that, can we wait a while? We don't have any guidance on that right now, but know that that's in the legislation and PD is going to have to deal with that question. Okay, so before we wrap up here this morning, I do want to share some resources. Last Thursday, I shared some individual resources that were coming out from our members, and I think there's going to be plenty more. Today, I really wanted to share some resources that are at the national level that will help you a little bit as you're thinking about that continuity of education piece. So I'm going to start with NAESP, and Steph, if you can open that up and share it with the screen. And the first article, if you can open that first article on that page. That's not the one. It's up further.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, go down low. There you go. So this one was called The Principal List of Things to Do During COVID-19. And so if you can open that article a little bit, I thought this was a really great article about things to think about. If you could scroll down just a little bit, Steph, for me. You can see there's a whole list. This was put, scroll back up again. So this was put together, keep going up a little bit more. This was put together by a principal and shared on Facebook. It really went viral. And there's some good things in here. So you can scroll down, interview family member, measure the perimeter of your home. These are things that, for example, don't require you necessarily to be online for those, that you could send some things out. Graphing birds, just keep scrolling down so that they can see some of those. I thought this was a really comprehensive list of things to do. And I think go all the way to the bottom. Let's see how many there are there. I mean, you can see it just keeps going on and on and on. So there's an excess of 40. There's about 40 there and some other things. So you might want to take a look at this list. So if you're struggling to think about things that are really offline, which some people are struggling with right now, this may be a good comprehensive list, which more things that are embedded into this one. So another article that was on this thread from NAESP, and I'll ask Steph to open that one as well, which I thought was an interesting one. If you can scroll down there. The title of this article is, I've never led an online school. What do I do now? And some of you may have that same question as well. There are many schools that are not one-to-one schools or haven't done a lot with online and are now forced to do this. This was actually an article from a high school principal from New Hampshire. So you might want to take a look at this article, which really surfaces some of the issues that are concerned with online learning and thinking about from this principal's framework, things that he didn't think about and now has to think about with the continuity of education. Okay. Another resource I want to share with you that really came out of this is a particular file. And this was a Word file, I think, that you can open up. It's called Tech for Learners. You have that one? No, that's not it. But why don't you stay on that one for a minute? I'll talk about this. So here's another national organization. It's the Association for Middle Level Education. I know middle level, you know, sometimes is looking for their own specific things because of their unique population as well. What this has is a lot of COVID-19 resources for middle level education. Over on the right hand of the screen, you can see some of those resources that are listed there. So you may want to check out the AMLE site, and I think most middle level educators are familiar with this site, and also the PAMLE site, Pennsylvania Association of Middle Level Educators. I was just talking to one of their people, Paul Meck, the other day about sharing their resources and talking about the whole list that they have. And then another one I want to share is from NASSP. And I think this will be an interesting resource for you. So if you can call that one up. So NASSP is going to start a town hall series. So when we talked about the mental health issues and staying connected with our teachers and supporting our communities, I think this is going to be a great town hall series. It's going to run over several times. Today, actually at 3 o'clock, they're actually going to do a special introduction to that series. And then you can see the listing there, supporting students and families on March 31st, communities in crisis, leading remote learning. I'm a little far away. I'm squinting to read the screen here from where I am, sustaining school life, and then finally planning for transitions. Those will run over a series of weeks. So you might want to, you know, take advantage of those town hall series that will be coming up, and knowing that our national organizations are doing a great job of continuing to push resources out to us as well. So you're not scrambling to write all of this down. We are recording the webinar today. We will be posting that link on our website at paprinciples.org. So you can just scroll to the back part of that webinar if you were here today to get a listing of those resources as well. So I'm going to pause just to see if there are any last minute questions at this point.
How are districts providing speech, occupational therapy, and physical therapy, etc.?
Yeah, so the question was, how are districts providing speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and I'll add to that, what about kids that had one-on-one aids, autistic support, things like that? Again, the U.S. Department of Education, you know, acknowledges that we cannot provide all of those services. So the best avenue is to be in contact with your parents in reference to that child's IEP and what the plan is at this point, knowing that you're going to have to reopen that IEP when we get back into session, knowing that there may be some services that are going to have to happen through extended school year or compensatory education. We know that's coming, and we know we're going to have to deal with all those issues the longer this goes on. But yes, you should be communicating with those parents about those specific things that you may not be able to provide at this point. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be communicating with the parents and trying to do other things as well. So whatever you provide with all students, you have to keep special education students in mind, whether that's packets, distance learning, whatever it is.
There was a question and discussion this morning with Beaver County Principal. How do we account for an assigned class rank?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we account for an assigned class rank for seniors? That's a question that came through our queue, through our educational organizations. At this moment in time, I do not have an answer for you for that question, but we will make sure that that one's in the queue as well.
Our district is going to post activities on the teacher's website for OT.
Okay, so one comment was that there are going to be resources posted on the district website for speech.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Who is the author of the article List of Things to Do During COVID-19?
So who is the author for the list of things to do during COVID-19? We'll have to check that with you. I don't have that right in front of me because we just scrolled down, but it was, I will tell you, we got that through NAESP and their daily bulletin that comes through. So I think if you open that article, you could see, again, who that person was. Yeah, you could, if you could click on that once again, I think her name was in there. So we think we may have lost that one. We might have closed it down. So, but we'll try to get that out to you as well.
You have the link for the article? You can send them?
Yes, we, in addition, we can send out the link. So if you didn't want to watch or hear me talk and drone on for a half an hour and get to the end, yeah, we'll send you the link for that article as well. We'll post that on our website about resources from both NAESP, AMLE, and NASSP so that you have those links as well. And again, keep your questions coming so that I can continue to advocate on your behalf as school leaders across Pennsylvania. I want to personally say thank you to the school leaders across Pennsylvania for the great job you're doing right now, for thinking creatively, for thinking out of the box, for not only thinking about students' academic and instruction, but also thinking about their mental health, the mental health of your staff, the mental health of your students, by creating and sustaining that culture that you developed in your school and to keeping that moving in the right direction. Those are all very positive things that we're hearing that people are sharing. And then finally, you know, I want to say, you know, personally, I wish you certainly that you and your family and your entire school community stays healthy and stays safe. Again, let's heed our Secretary of Health from Pennsylvania, her warnings about social distancing, about continuing to wash hands, continuing to wash surfaces, and not congregate in large groups. I mean, this is really serious, as you all know. And as I heard Governor Cuomo from New York saying, the virus has no timeline. It's going to make its own timeline, and we're going to have to adjust to that. In the interim, we are continuing to be here for you. And as the schools continue to grapple with some of these issues, we still plan, as long as I can get in the office and the state police aren't knocking on my door to remove me from the office, we'll continue to offer our Thursday thoughts as new things come out. So again, thank you once again for all you do. Stay in touch with us as we will stay in touch with you. Good day, everyone.